Cool.
Okay.
Hello and welcome to the meeting. My name is Sarah Scott and I'm the chair of James Gillespie's High School Parent Council. Tonight the Parent Council is hosting a meeting to consider proposals to deal with capacity issues at the school in the 2021-22 session due to delays to the refurbishment of the Darach building, which is intended to provide additional accommodation for the school and was due to be available from August this year. During the meeting, we will be hearing from Donald MacDonald, our head teacher, Laura Stewart, deputy head teacher for Equity and Rising Roles, and also council officers, Lorna French, Schools and Lifelong Learning Service Manager, and Crawford McGee, I hope if you can join us, Senior Manager, Estates and Operational Support for Communities and Families, and there will be an opportunity for questions at the end. I'll just go through a bit of housekeeping information before we move on to the programme for the evening. So we're aiming for the meeting to last about 1 hour. For the avoidance of doubt, we're only looking at capacity issues this evening and will not be dealing with usual Parent Council business so that we're able to focus on this specific topic. Our next normal meeting will be on Tuesday 23rd of February and further details on that meeting will be sent out nearer the time. Can I apologise in advance for any technical issues that there might be during the meeting? If you're having problems joining us or hearing us, or if one of the presenters' Wi-Fi freezes, we ask for your understanding and patience. We're using Microsoft Teams for the meeting because it's a system approved by the Council. Because of the way the system is set up, the only people who can be heard are the presenters. Everyone else attending can write questions via the Q&A panel, but can't be heard. The meeting is being recorded and it will be put online for those who can't make it this evening. Bearing that in mind, please don't share any personal information, in particular about children, that shouldn't be shared publicly. So as I have said, we can only take questions via the Q&A panel and the mics won't work for anyone other than the presenters. The questions will be published for everyone to see by our parent moderators, so if you'd like your question to say private, please say so when you type it in. And can I also ask that if you see a question on the Q&A panel that is similar to one that you want to ask, could you like that question rather than ask a repeat question? That will hopefully let us get through more questions and let our presenters concentrate on the most popular ones. And just to let you know in advance, we will be closing the Q&A panel to new questions at 5 to 8. The questions will be gathered up at the end and posted together with answers on the Parent Council website, so that even if there is not time to deal with everything this evening, they will be dealt with after the meeting. So now going on to the actual business of the meeting, a first outline of the plans to deal with the results of the delay to the Darach refurbishment was given to the Parent Council meeting in November last year, and in January this year the school produced documents about the proposals, setting out the plans and giving the results of a survey of S6 pupils. These have been circulated to parents via the school and they're also available on the Parent Council website, where you can also find a summary of the questions and comments raised by parents in reaction to those documents. You will have seen that the main thrust of the proposals is to increase use of flexible digital learning, or FDL, for advanced higher courses next year, and for that reason we have highlighted that those in the current S5 are likely to be particularly interested in what is being put forward. So the plan this evening is that we will hear from the presenters who will outline the plans and the reasoning behind them, and also address the questions raised by parents already. We hope that this will be dealt with by 7:30 PM or thereby. That will give us about half an hour or so for questions. So now I'd like to hand over to Lorna French, who's going to start the evening for us. Thank you, Lorna.
Pass you, Lorna.
Hi, sorry, I hope you can hear me. I'm assuming that you can, unless somebody tells me otherwise. And also that you can see these slides. So thank you very much for the opportunity to come along and talk to parents and carers this evening. What I'm attempting to do is to give you the strategy that sits behind the education proposals for next year and the coming sessions. And hopefully that will give you an indication of where all schools will be headed, not just James Gillespie's, and it will give you a sense of what we're trying to achieve, as I said, with all schools. So the strategy that I'm going to very briefly touch on links directly to the city vision, which all residents and employees, parents, carers, families have contributed to. And these are some of the headlines that we've all shaped. And this informs obviously the education strategy as well as the economic strategy and the care strategy. So our vision for education articulates very clearly with this. What we have for all schools, and in particular for those schools that are in the same position as James Gillespie's, is an expectation that they'll develop their learning strategy within the Edinburgh Learns for Life strategy, which sits within the business plan and articulates to the city vision. So you'll hear some very broad headlines tonight about this. This is the vision, mission and goals that we're all going to be working towards. It's a long-term piece of work, but obviously it sets out very clear expectations in terms of equity, in terms of health and in terms of sustainability. And running through all of those is the same high expectations for quality and a heavy reference and heavily influenced by digital. So this vision was actually created before and during lockdown, and it does refer to education that is seen out with the walls of a school. We felt that the vision that we currently had was very bound by the environment with which we had been delivering education for years and years and years. So it's no coincidence that this vision for education is one that's much more expansive. And I do think that really lends itself to what we want for the children and young people of James Gillespie's. So I'm not going to labour all of this too much, but I simply want to let you know that what we're expecting all schools to do is very much what James Gillespie's have already begun to do. And we're asking schools to review their curriculum rationale within the context of this expanded vision for education. They're all at different stages of doing that, but James Gillespie's and some other schools that are actively taking forward the learning estates, new buildings, extensions and so on, are more have progressed further with this. So reviewing their curriculum rationale in line with the city vision, and that means that they're going to be particularly influenced by COVID, this aspect here, but looking at new courses that will be delivered in the senior phase, and we're expecting that will include in-person learning, so children turning up into a classroom, as well as digital learning. And then this expanded vision will look at work with partnerships with schools locally, and you'll be familiar perhaps with our current consortia arrangements where children go to local schools to learn subjects that might not have been delivered in their own school. So we're expanding the expectations there that consortia can be the local schools, but it can be national schools and neighbourhood schools. We're also expecting greater partnership working with colleges and universities and staff coming in, as well as that increased expectation about digital. Similarly, Edinburgh has so many opportunities in terms of businesses, and we're expecting schools will develop and expand their vision for education for further higher education and into the world of work. So in terms of digital, and this is where James Gillespie's has got a head start on many schools in recent times, there will be a need to develop infrastructure, there will be a need to get devices organised, there will be a need for training for young people and for parents, and then there will be the professional learning that the teachers will take forward. All of that is underway at the moment, and that then opens up expanded content in terms of the curriculum. So these are all pluses, they're all features, they're all benefits of what lies ahead for the young people. And I'm very much aware that we are still building the steps that we're taking, but the vision for education has been accelerated because of COVID and because of lockdown, but it's very clearly there, and it does lean heavily on digital learning and that expansive vision of education. So that's really all that I wanted to do in terms of talking to you about the strategy behind this. And I'm going to pass over now to other colleagues that can talk more about the operational aspects.
Thank you for that, Lorna. I was wondering if you could pass on to Crawford McGee now. I think he's joined us. Are you there, Crawford? Hello.
Crawford, you're on now.
Yeah. Just seems to be going a bit so you can hear me now. Yeah. I mean, really, the whole focus of what I will tell you, I've no slides. I'm just going to give you a brief update about the Darrick project and the construction project. Many of you will know that Darrick was about just to go out to tender at the point of lockdown, and that actually probably couldn't have been in a worse position in terms of a project for the ongoing consequences and delays. We quite quickly, all our projects were shut down. Every construction site was shut down. The council did not allow us to continue with tender processes or anything, and that situation continued right through the summer. It got to the point where I put forward 4 priority projects that I'd said really need to get moving at the end of the summer, and Darrick was one of them. So we're now at the point where it's taken right up until now to get a contractor in place and ready to start the project. So that's why a contingency needs to, obviously we needed to work on the contingency, and Lorna has outlined why that contingency has been aligned with the new vision for learning. In terms of some of the specific questions asked for other types of contingencies, I think there's quite a few questions that came through about why couldn't we provide any additional temporary units on the current campus site. I mean, the answer to that is that would be very difficult in normal times. I think planning have said this before, you're not constructing anything further on the overall campus site. That doesn't mean you couldn't put in a planning application, you could, but it would be very unlikely to get approved. So we knew that anyway. But you add to that the massive risks that continue with COVID. Even if we kicked off a project, there could have been further construction lockdowns. In fact, there still could be. If this further new strain from South Africa kicks off, construction sites could be closed down in a couple of weeks' time. You just don't know. And that risk is just far too high for us to take forward any type of contingency that could then fail on top of a failing project. So that's why we had to come up with a contingency that would work. You add to that the very significant budget pressures that the council now faces. I'm tasked currently with saving over £60 million from our overall capital programme, which is going to be no easy task at all, given all the priorities that we have across the learning estate. So that's really why the contingency had to be something other than building. The timescales, hopefully, if things stay on track, is that Darrick will be ready for around about Easter 2022. So there's a bit of leeway there in terms of getting it definitely ready for the start of August 2022. And that's what we're heading forward with. The other main questions, I think, relate to trying to find accommodation for hub space that will fit with the flexible digital learning programme, and that's something we're working on. We've recognised that that's definitely required, but we don't have a definite solution for that yet. But we'll continue to work on that and pass on further information as we come. So that's why the proposal. That's a sort of construction and buildings background to how we came to this proposal. But as you've heard, it also fits with the longer term vision for learning throughout the city. It also fits with the longer term sustainability vision. We want to not be building buildings if we can at all possibly avoid it, to saving all the energy costs, the construction costs, etc. So that's all really I want to add. I'm sure that Donald and Laura have other positive stuff to add as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Crawford. If you're able to stay around, if there may be questions later on which you might be able to answer, if that's possible.
Yeah, no, I'm good. I think that's fine.
Good. Thanks very much. Could I pass on to Donald now to talk about how this plan will apply to Gillespies in particular?
Thanks, Sarah, and very good evening, everyone. Normally say it was nice to see everyone, but that privilege is not available to me tonight. So I'm going to say a few things then, a little bit about how we arrived where we are now in terms of why flexible digital learning, or FDL, we believe is the way to deal with this current shortfall in accommodation. Let me preface that by saying that who would have believed a year ago this time, when life was progressing as normal, spring was on its way and summer to look forward to, that we would have had the year that we've just had. It's been an incredible year, a roller coaster year, and at each week, each month brings new challenges, new opportunities as well for us to look at what we can do differently to address and ensure that we deliver for our pupils. Can I also say at the outset that I'm very aware, and this has come through in the early feedback from parents and pupils, that the current S5 may well be the ones that have borne the brunt of the pressure associated with the pandemic. And I'm thinking in particular of excuse me, having had no exams in S4 and now having no exams in S5, and there are still continuing uncertainties around how we will assess in S5. And then, of course, what we're seeing is that we're going to make changes to how we deliver learning and teaching in S6. When I learned of the shortfall that we're going to experience in education, in accommodation, last autumn in August when we returned, and I met with Laura. Initially, it was a case of, yikes, how are we going to deal with this? We had several meetings then, and I have to say, I've been really, really well supported by Lorna, Crawford, and other officers of the council, and very positive and solution focused. We knew we had to find a solution, and we came up with a range of possible ways we could do it. We shared a paper prior to Christmas, I think it was November, with parents already on that, and some of the areas that we came up with. Coming into this, I was really concerned about how this might impact on the current S5, and particularly their own health and well-being at a time of such uncertainty. I was also concerned about the staff and how they might respond to being asked to be delivering learning and teaching quite differently in S6. We quickly identified that we were going to go down a flexible route with digital learning. It would really have to be the S6, and it would have to be the advanced hires, and a whole variety of reasons for that. S6 primarily for around 80% of our S6 who are aiming to go to university. We need to create opportunities for them where they are more independent learners. That's key. If we were presented with this challenge prior to the lockdown experience last year, I'm not sure if I would have embraced or been so enthusiastic about the digital approach that we're coming up with. The first lockdown, we learned quickly. There were so many things that we got wrong in terms of how we delivered learning and teaching. The second lockdown, the current one that we're going through, we've done much better. But clearly there are things that we can do even better. That having been said then, I'm very aware that we have reduced face-to-face contact with pupils. It will be based on 3 face-to-face contacts. Parents rightly will be concerned about how this could impact on attainment. I've had more opportunity to think about this, and I honestly and genuinely believe that this will not impact negatively on attainment. In fact, what I'm absolutely determined to do is that attainment will rise. We're not aiming for attainment being maintained. That would be very risky. We have to aim for attainment being raised. And a parallel with this was when we decamped to Darragh between 2013 and 2016. At the time when I said that in late 2012, people thought he's just saying that. Well, we did. We did raise attainment through those years. In fact, we were awarded the Acadale of 2 Scottish State School of the Year awards in 2015. That aside, I'm convinced this time round also that attainment will rise. I'm absolutely determined that it will. So shortly, I'm going to pass on to my colleague Laura Stewart, who will take you through some of the detail of it. But I do want to say that I understand parents' concerns, reservations, but also I think going forward, it's important that we remain positive, solution focused as we can. Of course, we'll learn along the way, but genuinely, I am excited about what we've come up with. I think it is the best solution, and I am quite and genuinely convinced that it will deliver and will raise attainment. So at this stage, then we'll hand over to my colleague Laura Stewart, who will take us through a bit more detail then of what we're proposing.
Okay, I'm just going to share my screen. Donald, can you give a thumbs up if you can see the presentation? At the moment, I'm seeing it's just loading.
I'm seeing it as just loading also, Laura, so it may need a moment just to warm up.
So what the presentation is about to show is that we have gone to collect feedback from students and feedback from staff on the proposal of this 3 periods in classroom teaching balanced with 2 periods of flexible digital learning. And then we've looked at if this was to begin in June, what would we require for it to take place? And I know parents have submitted quite a few questions in advance, so we've looked at answering some of them within this presentation, but also we'll be able to take questions afterwards and also following the meeting. So when we asked students, we first went to get to speak to the S6 pupil voice and gather their views, which then led to us doing a survey of the advanced higher students currently in S6. We selected these students, as Donald says, because they are currently doing the courses that we're looking to teach in an alternative way. And those courses are very well suited to a different balance of teaching styles and strategies, which is very different to the higher courses, which the 5th years are currently studying. We are also in the process of surveying S5 and S6 on their home learning experience from round 1 and round 2, drawing upon things that they have found positives and things they found have been barriers to them learning, which will obviously be able to build on this. We have also prepared, I know a few of you had asked whether we were going to be speaking to the S5s. So we have an assembly scheduled where we want to share information about what the S6 experience could be like in comparison to what they're experiencing in S5. And we've got a survey for the S5 students as well, where we can identify any concerns and provide reassurances. So some of the feedback from the S6 survey so far, like staff, they were very against reducing courses offered, and they didn't want their courses to be solidly delivered online. But travelling to other schools, as we currently do with our neighbourhood schools, was still agreeable, and the majority were neutral with regards to that aspect though. When we started talking about flexible digital learning and the other contingencies, flexible digital learning was the one that gained the most positive response from the students. More than half thought it was a great idea, and one student was against it. But the interesting part to that is that any student in S5 currently, in S6 currently studying a course with reduced allocation, and that's without any of the flexible digital learning time, we're actually in favour of flexible digital learning as a solution. Following a bit of further clarification with the S6 on what FDL time would look like, the fact that it would have clear work allocated, teacher feedback would be brought in to all of the work completed during flexible digital learning. There would be somewhere to go to study during these periods, and that the teacher access during that time would be protected. That then increased the pupils' views of flexible digital learning to over 90%, and no student at that stage was in any disagreement to it as an appropriate solution. 6 students stated that they thought that they might find FDL challenging, but as detailed on the next slide, the steps that the school would take in preparation for this mitigated these. And you can see here we have how to cover the course content in time. Many schools already deliver advanced higher in 3 periods with positive data to show the success of this. We will also have an additional flexible digital learning time protected to further support, which the other schools currently don't. We will also have access to a class teacher during this time protected. The time will be on the timetables for the students and the teachers for both their classroom periods and for the flexible digital learning time, which then allows support for those struggling to be accommodated easily. Work during flexible digital learning time is directed. It's not self-directed study for the students. It's directed by teachers with set tasks. School systems for tackling lack of motivation, engagement or attendance would be in place for FDL time in the same way as it would be for classroom-based learning. And actually, due to the fact that we'll want to be monitoring it very, very closely, then it will probably strengthen this overall. Throughout, we'll have to make sure that the quality assurance procedures are in place, because a few students were nervous that the teachers might overload them with work to carry out during the flexible digital learning time. So that will protect that from happening, asking for feedback from staff and students throughout the year. And as you can see, the study spaces and hub are being investigated currently, as Crawford said. We then look to staff, and 61% of staff already have experience of teaching and delivering advanced hires in 3 periods or less, but none of them, again, have ever had the protected time on top of that. No staff at Gillespie's currently delivering advanced hires were opposed to the FDL proposals, and a significant number have identified the positives with the extra flexibility. We will be sharing a few more examples of that between now and June as we gather the teachers' feedback on how they would use that time, what kind of activities and tasks they would build into it. And that will be shared with parents, carers and students in the run up to June. There was some agreement by staff for increasing neighbourhood links and creating a more efficient timetable, which we would be doing anyway. However, cutting course choice was, again, similarly to the student views, not supported. Key things they came up with. Well, they came up with some interesting suggestions, which we'll be looking into between, as I say, now and June, that we could use things like the theatre, where we could offer lecture-style sessions for larger numbers during FDL time. Some subjects are suited to multi-level classes and others are definitely not, but that's also something where it is well suited that we can look into. There is a very high importance of correctly coursing students, so that those in advanced hires are able to cope with the level of challenge. And we've got spaces around the school out with classes which we can use for small group support or tutorial sessions during FDL time. Partnerships with neighbourhood schools we already have, and we'll be strengthening these. And we'll also, some staff were very keen on linking to some outside agencies, such as the Edinburgh Council Outdoor Learning Team, for things especially like geography and biology, who have large sections very well suited to that. Staff recognise the importance of planning time, ability to meet with students, tackling the disengagement, attendance issues, giving opportunities for feedback, and having somewhere, as we said, as a hub. Identification of staff and students with barriers to FDL and knowing how to give additional support was something that was also highlighted. Hence, we will have devices which will be well suited to the work that they're to carry out, provided for all, with the Wi-Fi and training as mentioned by Lorna. So in preparation, we've already been gathering information from staff and students about what resources we need, what would be well suited to FDL time, and what's well suited to classroom time. Students are going to have an input to how best to use this time. And the expectations of the work and the tasks to be completed within that time will be well shared. We will be drawing on skills learnt from lockdown. And again, supporting those who have additional support needs. Ongoing, we continue to work with City of Edinburgh Council, staff and students and parents to address concerns. We will be adapting whole school systems to include and suit flexible digital learning. And throughout the whole of this year and next year, we'll be continually monitoring and evaluating each stage as we go. Some of the parental questions which came in between the last session and today mentioned the concept of twilight sessions where you could extend the school day. This is something a few staff have asked about as well. Balance with extracurricular activities and commitments out with school for staff and students. This is something which could occur at times and is being investigated, but it wouldn't replace the need for FDL. Parent carer input, the home engagement and family learning are important, whether it's flexible digital learning or just normal schoolwork. That's why we would be sharing our expectations and plans for FDL time with parents and carers in advance and also with students. The health and wellbeing has been mentioned by Donald as well, which is a priority for all year groups throughout next year and, well, in general anyway. But we're looking forward to when we are able to be back on site. S6 are a big part of the whole school improvement. There's always opportunities for them to take on leadership roles and mentoring in younger classes. And this will be really easy to timetable in with a little bit of extra flexibility. So these kind of opportunities will still be there and enrich their experience in S6. Plus they will actually have study areas set out for them in various places in the school and hopefully, as Crawford said, the hub, which will be something that they've really struggled with in the past. Advanced higher courses are perfectly suited. That's why, as Donald said, we looked at S6. It's tried and tested in many, many schools, but it would, in our school, include the digital training aspect and development time. And as I say, includes this flexible digital learning time, which doesn't happen across the board at present. A lot of the students and the staff's initial responses were to compare it to lockdown. However, it will be very different to where they're currently at. The teacher contact in class will be there for 3 hours per week for every subject, and the support sessions in school will be possible during those times, as well as the teacher being available to meet with students. The tasks that are shared are not the entire course, obviously, as it is currently. They're tasks shared specifically suited to flexible digital learning time. Tricky core content and other things like practical work will still be focused in class time. And then finally, staff that are only using flexible digital learning with advanced higher classes, they won't be doing it with all of the year groups as they currently are, which allows them to have much more time to focus on the S6 and the preparation of these resources. All of the work that we've done so far, relevant documents we've shared with Parent Council, feedback from pupil surveys and so on, we're going to link to the school website so it's easy for you to find and keep up to date with things as they progress. On top of that, questions from today and any student and staff questions that have been coming in, we're going to add to an information document which will also be uploaded to the website. And there'll be a contact information part there for you to ask for feedback or further questions following this. And that is where I am going to stop so that we have time for you to ask us questions just now. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that, Laura. I think we're doing quite well with the timing. It's 7:35 now. And perhaps we can go on to some of the questions which parents have raised, quite a lot of them in the Q&A. I'll try and get through as many of them as possible, but just to confirm again that those that are not answered this evening will be answered after the meeting. Before we start on this, could I just respond to the question about the issues that were raised at the last meeting and where the Q&A for responses for that is, and why can we not find them on the Parent Council website? That is, I'm afraid to say, because they're not up yet. They have not been entirely completed because they were largely about SQA assessments, and everything has changed since then. Donald and I were just talking about that before the meeting started. I think this will be up next week probably, but if you would like your question answered more quickly, please email the Parent Council or the school, and I'm sure we can get that answered as soon as possible, so apologies for that. Just going back to the questions for this evening, could I start off with one from a parent, which is, how much of what is being presented is up for negotiation? Is this a briefing or a consultation? I don't know who would like to take that one on. Donald, Lorna?
Yeah, I'm quite happy to respond to that. There's a bit of both, obviously. We're really keen that if there are any showstoppers that people identify, that we need to know these at this stage. I think we talked about this in the early stages about how many options we were going to put on the table for parents. It wasn't realistic to put options on the table that we knew would be thrown out of hand. For example, reducing the number of courses available, that simply wasn't viable. We also, attractive as it is in many ways, we looked at twilight Saturday classes, for example. We looked at that. A showstopper there was that it would mean that pupils would not be able to participate, for example, in choirs, orchestras, extracurricular during the week. So we have genuinely looked at a lot of other things. So it is more veering towards consulting on the nuances and tweaking the approach that we're talking about. I'm going to be quite upfront and say that there isn't another option that I don't think that we can take at this stage and deliver in time. Bear in mind also, we may well be changing timetable earlier this year, depending on what pans out with course terms and so on and so forth. So yeah, more, this is the model and we need to make nuanced amendments to it, more so than we would be starting again on something completely different is my thinking on the matter.
Well, thank you very much for that, Donald. Could I go now on to, there's a few questions about the sort of accommodation options. Perhaps I could pass those on to Crawford. I'll just, because I'll probably not find them again, I'll just kind of summarise them. Have you discussed the possibility of temporary units with the planning department? Can we be sure that they would, can we assume that they wouldn't be possible? Will the work be carried out in time in the Darach? I think you have kind of addressed that already, or is there a possibility of further delay? And have we spoken to the private sector organisations in Edinburgh who might be not using accommodation at the moment about whether the school could use that instead?
We've talked to planners several times about the expansion of the campus, whether that be for the primary school or secondary school, and they're very clear. The last temporary units we put in were temporary. We have a 2-year temporary planning application. We're going to have to extend that. Put in an application to extend that. So that's another risk that's sitting over us. And yeah, so I'm very frequently in touch with the planners about a whole range of projects, including this one. But I mean, that's not the real reason that we can't take forward temporary units, just that it would not be possible. The risk was far, far too great. The council were not putting forward the new projects at that time. So it just was not an option that we could take forward. In terms of Darach, yeah, I mean, the big risk there is obviously further shutdowns of construction sites. Some of our projects, we're starting to see productivity drop off in this current lockdown, whether that be to construction workers being off because there may be shielding or supply chains dropping off. So you know, the construction market is in a very, very fragile place, which is another reason not to be taking on any new projects that we don't have to. So hopefully, but there is a bit of flexibility in terms of Derek. We've got a contractor in place now, so we're, the biggest risk would be construction sites closing down again. Is there a final? Oh, looking at yeah, I mean we're talking to private companies, charities, all sorts of people. We've got one preference, but we can't. It's not confirmed or guaranteed yet. So yeah, for the hub space, but yeah, we'll talk to whoever we can. If anybody wants to suggest anything to us because they have connections themselves, we're happy to look at that. I think the overall thing to remember is that this is still happening because of COVID. The implications of COVID are significant and long-lasting in relation to construction projects. So, and that's what has to really be bared in mind. I think Donald and his team and Laura are doing an absolutely great job with what they're trying to put in place to get, to continue dealing with the implications of COVID. That has to be remembered in all of this.
Thank you. Just going back to that issue of the hub, because this has come up in a number of the questions. I appreciate from what you're saying this evening that it's not clear yet where the hub would be. And a number of the questions are along the lines of this one. If there is space for all the children who want to do personal study, why can this space not be used to teach them? And a number of other questions along those lines. Would anybody be able to pick that up?
Laura or Donald may want to add to this. I think it's to do with the actual creation of classrooms. So we're not looking at space for classroom teaching in groups, in large groups. It's a completely different type of space that the hub would be. So yeah, that's the answer.
Does anybody want to add anything else about that?
Yeah, if I just might come in there, in terms of hub spaces that are being explored, they would be areas with Wi-Fi, for example, and we'd be aiming to create spaces for the S6 to work independently, but yet together collaboratively. One of the challenges we have in the new school is we've never had an S6 common space. That was something we considered a common room space, an area where they could go socialise and work together, because a key part of learning, and we're primarily aiming at the university-bound pupils here, is about working together, working collaboratively. I know in some of the questions coming up from parents asking, well, it's too far for my son, daughter to travel home. So it's really important then, if we're not able to offer a space on the site, and there will be spaces on the site, pockets of spaces in the study booths and so on and so forth. So that's why we're exploring these hubs. We want to try and make it similar to what they'll experience in higher education. Again, it's about inculcating those skills of independent study that will best prepare them. I don't know if there was anything else that Laura wanted to add to that.
It was just to link into something that Crawford said, which is the spaces that they're looking at are not like the size and scale of classrooms with the same ability for access. So they're being looked at, as Donald says, for study spaces rather than as classroom.
Okay, thank you very much. Just keeping on the issue of alternative possibilities, we have had questions about the possibility of working with another school in the locality for a sort of joint solution. Boroughmuir High School is suggested because obviously they have capacity problems as well. Could anybody comment on that at all? Whether there's a possibility of doing anything along with them? Some sort of space found midway between Gillespie's and Boroughmuir, for example.
I could maybe just come in for a second just to highlight to everyone that all of our secondary schools from this point onwards are looking at ways that they can collaborate and offer a shared curriculum. And that's going to mean the notion of the consortia that we've had up until now that's been expanded during lockdown will expand even further. So although people are very keen on a physical location for learning, one of the things that we know that has been very successful, and we have been gathering evidence over the success of remote learning. So this is an area of development for all schools. It's not just a necessity for James Gillespie's. All schools are going to be developing this broader consortia. I think it's important that everybody knows that and hopefully is reassured by that.
So, but there's nothing specific, there's not a possibility of anything specific with Boroughmuir beyond the kind of general plans?
Could I just add to that, Sarah? Boroughmuir is one of our neighbourhood schools that we do work closely with. So where, for example, we have what we call the travelling column. It takes place on a Tuesday and a Thursday afternoon. Where possible and where Boroughmuir would have capacity, we would, those youngsters it may be more attractive to them to have the 5 periods during the travelling time, or at Firhill or at St Thomas's. We work also with Liberton and Gracemount, and they with us. That work begins in earnest, usually from mid-March onwards, when course choicing timetables start to be formed. So these are options which we would consider in addition to what we're doing. So this is very much contingency planning that we're undertaking.
Okay, thank you very much. There have been a number of questions about the effect on children who have, as Donald said earlier on, had a very disruptive S4, a very disruptive S5, and then we're going into S6, and they will also be having a different experience under these proposals from what might have been expected. I mean, there are issues of mental health and well-being. So one comment is, how does this proposal to increase self-learning sit alongside the increased mental health issues young people, especially at the top end of the school, are experiencing as a result of increased isolation? Does FDL compound the mental issues experienced during lockdown? How does the school/education authority plan to counter these? Donald, do you want to, or Laura?
Yeah, can I just come in at that point? It's something just prior to lockdown, I think had been recognised nationally that we have got an increasing number of young people with a growing number of variety of mental health issues. The work to address that has accelerated over the past year. We are now, as a school, in a much stronger position in terms of the counselling service that we offer. We now have access to 3 full-time counsellors, where that was a little bit more ad hoc previously. That's something that's been put in place. We also have undertaken staff training. We have up to 50 staff who have either taken training or are being trained to directly support youngsters. That having been said, there is no denying that this possible, this change to the delivery of lessons will add to youngsters' apprehension. I have a key role in this, in I think being positive, being reassuring. I do genuinely believe that this will work, and I will do my utmost to reassure all the pupils. We will meet with the S5s at an assembly in the next week or two. That has had to be postponed because of the current lockdown. We were aiming to do that just after the prelims had taken place. But allied to that, I would add, is that we have to think about what is the purpose of the S6. We have targeted the advanced hires here. And whilst there are a number of Scottish universities who will ask for advanced hires, generally it is hires that they ask for. And the advanced hires is by way of preparation for a university. Therefore, I'm comfortable with the pedagogy, the approach that we're talking about using here to deliver. I think it will ease the transition to university. There is no doubt that youngsters who have experienced a full school life experience may have had other difficulties in transitioning to higher education. Perhaps with this approach, one positive may well be that they're going to be better suited to adapting and more quickly adapting to the university learning style, because this is more akin to what happens at HE. I'll just mention that Laura and I had also spoken with former pupils at university and sought their views about how this might sit and how similar it might be to what it was at university. And we got very, very favourable feedback from those university students.
On the subject of S5 consultation, which was mentioned there, we have had a number of comments about that. So one example is, why have the S5s not been consulted on this? I'm an S5 and many of us are furious about this, that we're not being told or asked for our views. It's a longer comment, but why is this concern for our mental health not being carried over to a normal school year next year? Is there, I mean, I appreciate that you haven't mentioned that there was a scheduling issue, partly because of lockdown, but should S5s have been consulted earlier?
I mean, I'll maybe answer here, and then Donald, if you want to add, feel free, obviously. But one of the reasons that we haven't consulted the S5s yet is because we've been looking at contingencies since August, and the concept of FDL and it becoming one of the viable contingencies didn't happen until after October, because we didn't have the digital infrastructure and funding for that to support it. As soon as we had some of the things that we required to make that contingency work, we had to find out if the staff were confident in driving it forward, and we had to find out if those who currently undergo the S6 courses felt that it would be suitable for them too. Yes, we know other schools teach advanced hires in 3 periods, but it was about getting that evidence from pupils within our own school. And between October and Christmas, we have been gathering that evidence to the point where we felt that this is our favoured approach. We knew that the S5 were working towards their prelims, hence straight after the prelims, we were able to schedule wanting to gather feedback from them. But then when these were cancelled, and obviously the exams were cancelled, it was about finding a time to not add to the stresses and pressures on them. So there's not been a large period where we've been sitting on these proposals. We've been working on them and making sure that we felt that they were strong, viable, and would be really good for our school before taking them any further forward. So I appreciate they may feel out of the loop, but they will certainly be a very important part of our planning processes, and will be consulted and their voices heard between now and June.
Thank you, Laura. Sorry for being so slow at this, and we have now 80 questions, so I'm getting lost in amongst them and trying to make sure I pick up a kind of broad range of different issues. A lot of them are interconnected. A number of them are about the quality in practice of digital learning based on experiences this year. For example, where are we? No. Having spent a day teaching in a hub, I'm well aware of how current tech that both children and staff have is in no way up to the demands of remote learning. Neither is the Wi-Fi capability in schools. What will be done to dramatically improve this? Perhaps you could comment generally, if somebody could pick this up, about the quality of learning you get through digital means in comparison to in-class learning. I don't know if Donald or Laura would like to deal with that.
I'm probably best to take the question that I think the questioner was aiming at was the quality of the kit, really, the quality of the device, the quality of the Wi-Fi, and from the perspective of the teacher and the perspective of the learner. And there is no doubt that there is a variety of different devices out there at the moment. The preferred device is the iPad, and that's been through a range of different quality assurance processes, if I can put it that way, from the start of the city's vision for digital learning in 2015, I think it was. There was an audit and analysis piece done, and the iPad was arrived upon at that stage. I'll not go on because we're running out of time perhaps, but the issues about infrastructure are absolutely fundamental to the success of the project. So that's been shared with our digital services partners. And as I explained earlier, this is a project that James Gillespie's are taking forward, but it is an overall project that the city's taking forward. So all of these issues will be addressed in time for this particular project to be live. In terms of the quality of digital learning, I suppose it would be best for me to hand over to the school, because they've got the most current knowledge about the attainment and the quality that they're able to deliver remotely at the moment.
Thanks, Lorna. Donald or Laura, would you like to comment on the actual learning experience going beyond the kit and the Wi-Fi and whatever?
Can I just come in at that point? We were talking on a 5-period allocation that 3 of those periods will be face-to-face. The other 2 periods may involve a mix of different types of learning. It may be online face-to-face, it may be tutorial type support. But the key thing to remember is that this is not exclusively online learning. Again, I was discussing this recently with Laura in terms of the amount of tuition, and actually I'll call it didactic teaching, that would take place in a 5-period block. A good part of the week, my own background is in teaching physics. I wouldn't ordinarily in physics be teaching for my full 5-period allocation. No more than 2 of these, I would suggest I would be teaching. 2 or 3 of the periods would be given over to practical work, investigative work. And that's an area that I know well, it's physics. And the early feedback from other teachers also is that, and I think it's why that they are positive about this means of delivery and not as negative as they might have been. I don't know if you wanted to add to that, Laura.
I'll just add briefly, which is that as I went round and spoke to advanced higher teachers of different subject areas and talked about the FDL time, knowing that they had 3 periods face-to-face and knowing that they had flexibility to use that time for things such as excursions, bringing outside speakers to do workshops online with people, doing drafts for folios, doing practice for music pieces, people were getting, the response was positive. People were looking at ways that they would use the time that wouldn't be limited to being within a school, and knowing that there are FDL periods, it would be easier to get pupils to meet out without having to do some of the normal bureaucratic stuff that you do when you want pupils outside of a class. So I felt reassured and more confident listening to all of the responses from all of them. My background's biology, so I wouldn't want to judge for other subjects. But I think that's the information which, when we piece together how people want to use it and share that with students and parents, I think you'll find that incredibly reassuring, because it's not just sitting at a computer reading through a PowerPoint. It's very much an interactive use of that time, which will, as Donald said, sometimes involve digital and sometimes involve numerous other ways that that teachers have responded to me so far.
Thank you. I'm aware that we're kind of running out of time, so I will just take a few more questions. One of them, this has been raised more than once in the Q&A, is about pupils with learning support needs in S6. Is this an appropriate plan of action for them as well? Perhaps Donald or Laura would like to comment on that, unless somebody else is better.
Yeah, I'm happy to come in. One thing that we have learned how to do better, I mean, first of all, a year ago, we weren't in the position that we were delivering any kind of online learning. We are now, so we've had to learn, and we've had to adapt to evolving circumstances in terms of supporting all of our pupils. And I have no doubt, with the support of the council, if additional resources needed to support particular pupils with whatever that might be in terms of accessing their learning, we will do that. And this is really tying it into the question about consulting with pupils. I do want to apologise for any offence or hurt that's been caused by us not consulting with you. really that is not our way. And had we more time, of course, we would have had opportunity to do that. And of course, we'll reflect on the processes that we've gone through here. One of the things that we will want to do for sure is to identify any barriers to any youngsters learning between now and the course is starting. And those barriers that we may not currently be aware of, I hope there aren't, then we'll want to ensure that we're ready to go and we're proactive in ensuring that we're ready to go from June, when the courses would traditionally start, if that's what we do this year. Rob Cockcroft and Pupil Support Team, we've shared the detail of this with them, and work is ongoing to ensure that we have as many of the bases covered, and hopefully all. Laura, if there's something you wanted to add to that.
Just that teachers of the advanced higher courses currently, when they have anywhere between 3 and 5 periods at the moment, very much link with support for learning to make sure that they can provide additional support where required. So that expectation would still be there, and the discussion of being able to do small tutorial groups or support groups with certain students during that time when the rest of the class will be working on tasks and not require necessarily additional support, allows that to be strengthened further.
Can I move now on to some questions of sort of general policy about things like rising roles? There's a kind of group of questions which are along the lines of, what is the medium and long-term plan? Are roles at the school going to decrease over time? Is there a plan for another high school in South Edinburgh to deal with increased pupil numbers? And is it possible for numbers coming into the school to be restricted, for example, out of catchment pupils not being brought into the school? I assume that means next year, and would that make any difference? Who would like to deal with these kind of bigger issues of pupil numbers?
Can I just pick up on the one of intake into the school? We are in the position that there is an increasing number of people living in catchment for James Gillespie's High School currently, and it has been the practice over the last 3 years in particular that unless you're in catchment, you simply don't get a place at James Gillespie. So that's the first thing that's being taken care of. The question that once you're in the school, the principal has always been the case that once you're in the school, you remain in the school right through until you choose to leave. And for 90% of our pupils, that's at the end of S6. The wider question about catchment reviews and how all of this might be managed across the city is possibly one that Lorna may have a bit more to add to.
Thank you, Donald. I only wish I did. It's actually not within my remit. If Crawford is not able to take the mic here, I'll do the best I can. Yeah.
So I've turned my camera off because the whole system crashed at one point. I think it might have been to do with that. The long-term plan for James Gillespie's High School, I suppose the medium-term plan, if you like, was Darrick, and obviously that provided significant additional accommodation, and that's what we were focusing on delivering. The longer-term plan, as many of you may be aware, is to create a dedicated secondary school for Gaelic medium education, and ultimately, when you look at the projections, that starts to see the role for James Gillespie's High School come back down towards the capacity that's available on the main campus in time. We're starting to see roles in the primary schools drop off. They've been dropping for about 3 years now. So over time, roles will start coming down in the secondary sector as well. There's not any specific plan for a new secondary school in South Edinburgh at the moment. We are waiting all the details of the new housing sites coming forward, and we will do a full education appraisal, and that will be linked in with some of the overarching strategy Lorna mentioned earlier in terms of outdoor learning and digital learning across the city. And at that point, we'll come forward with a full education appraisal across the city, which will mention catchment reviews, obviously with catchment reviews, they have to be taken through the proper processes and ultimately have to be approved by council. So that's all in the political environment ultimately in terms of approvals. And I think that's really the specifics of James Gillespie's.
Thank you, Crawford. It's 8:05 now. Can I suggest we take a couple of more questions that finish at 8:10 and see if we can deal with a few more of the many issues which have been raised in the question and answer panel. Looking at accommodation again, one issue that comes up a lot in questions is it not possible to use buildings other than school buildings, so as actual classroom space, church halls or office space or anything like that? Is that being considered at all? Would it be possible? Could that ever have been part of the plan? I don't know if Crawford would want to comment on that, or maybe Donald.
I'll comment first, and Donald may add to what I'm saying. As part, all across the summer, as part of looking at the contingencies plan for if schools were going to go back with 50%, rules because of social distancing, etc. We're looking at all different buildings where we could maybe accommodate pupils. But it was really on a temporary basis. So there would be work required to any of these buildings that are listed. They're the type of buildings that we're looking for in terms of the hub idea, and I think they'd be more suited to that on a temporary basis. But turning them all into classrooms, sort of full session, full academic year, is a completely different prospect. Other pressures in terms of all these spaces wanting to be opened up by their owners as well the minute the pandemic is over. So that's where I think that the plan that's been put in place is the best solution all round. You've heard from Donald, maybe say more, that it's not, it's completely different from the learning that's going on at the moment. There's still a lot of class contact time, and the things that will be done by students in their non-teacher time will be different from what's happening at the moment. So I think when you add it all up and you look at it all objectively, that we're putting in place the absolute best solution. And some of these suggestions for buildings, yes, we can look at them in terms of providing hub space.
Thank
And
you.
if I might
Donald.
just come in, Sarah. Yeah, I can see that we're in an evolving situation. Gosh, we think about the amount of change we've experienced and uncertainty in the last 10 or 11 months. We are 5 months from starting our courses potentially, and then August is month 8, that's a further 7 months from now, 6 or 7 months from now. I see the situation evolving, and I suppose to pick up on the point about consulting with pupils, etc. If in the ensuing months we find that there are other opportunities that become available, be they other local buildings or whatever, and on balance, and as the experience unfolds, that it is advantageous to have youngsters gathering in a building for some direct teaching rather than the online stuff, we may look at that. The whole point about this is that it's flexible, and if we find that there are aspects we want to tweak and develop, and there are other buildings, then we'll certainly look at those. And I know from discussions with Crawford and Lorna, the council will actively support. But there remains questions about the access to these buildings and what's going to be available, because they, like us as organisations, there's that deal of uncertainty about when people will go back and how the buildings could be used and so on and so forth. I would suggest that we're open, we'll be flexible, and we will, to the very best we can, take people's views on board, working within the parameters and the resources that we have made available to us.
Thank you. Could I ask a quick question which has come up about the current S5s, and because of online learning at the moment, are missing out on, for example, practical skills. Obviously, when they come to S6, they may be doing subjects which require time practicing practical skills, maybe sciences or other things like that. How will this plan fit with that kind of requirement? Donald or Laura, I suppose that's a question for the school and how it will manage these things.
I'm happy to just say one part towards that, which is the biologist in me. I used to teach advanced higher until just a few years ago. Those practical skills would be taught, like the core tricky content, during the 3 periods where the class is in the classroom. And the FDL time would be used for things like strengthening exam technique, or consolidation of work learnt in class, or research and preparation for their investigation, like drafting up a pilot study that they would then carry out in school. Having taught the advanced higher for many years, as Donald said, you never teach for those 5 periods and you don't do practical work solidly throughout. You would just focus, what do you need to do within a classroom and what's best suited to the time where you would have supported them working independently within the classroom, and you wouldn't have been linked. So because the advanced hires are so different to the hires, the content is less, but the skills are at a higher level. Then, as we said before, it's well suited to that, and that's why schools are able to teach it in 3 periods across the city. But as I say, I personally fought for the idea of having that additional FDL time, because it's very useful to be able to have a timetabled point where they can come and ask for help and a teacher would be free.
Thank you, Laura. So we've reached just after 8:10 now. Perhaps I could ask one last question, which is about next steps. I know we've already heard that there are plans for consulting with S5 pupils. Will there be any further consultation, for example, with parents following this? Do we know what the next steps are in relation to these plans? Donald, maybe you would like to take that up, or maybe Laura.
Yes, it was a question that appeared early on, and I did say that in an ideal world, a change of this nature, we would be planning 2 or 3 years in advance, and there would be lots and lots of time for consultation. The reality is that we're responding to a situation, I think, that is beyond anybody's control. And we're putting in what we think is a contingency and the best way of delivering learning and teaching. So to that end, if there are particular concerns or areas that we haven't addressed tonight, or areas that we need to be looking at, I'd really welcome feedback and comment from parents, pupils, anyone who's listening this evening, and we will take that on board. And I think beyond that, we're listening, we'll tweak and develop things. But I do think that what we're proposing here will lead to successful outcomes for the youngsters. And what I also give assurance on, there's a whole number of other questions that have appeared in the bar. You've done really well. Thank you, Sarah, for taking the ones that have had most thumbs up, etc. But we will respond to all of the questions and develop answers to them. I appreciate an hour isn't enough to give this an airing. And for some parents tonight, this is the first opportunity really to interact with us. But there will be ongoing interaction. And I hope that we will reassure everyone and have everyone on board come whenever the courses start. Hopefully that will be at the beginning of June.
Thank you, Donald. I think now we've got to nearly 8:15. We'll just close up the meeting just now and thank everybody for joining us this evening, and thank you to the presenters Lorna French, Crawford McGee, Donald MacDonald and Laura Stewart. As Donald has just said, we will publish answers to the questions raised this evening on the Parent Council website as soon as they're available. I think it's fair to say that what we're considering this evening is an important issue of concern to pupils and parents, especially coming after such a disrupted period in everybody's educational experience. Thank you to everybody who has brought forward and explained the plans. I think as parents we will have to regroup and consider what we've heard this evening. To parents, as always, the Parent Council can be reached by email. Our email address is jghscouncilcoms, all one word, at gmail.com, and you can also find that on our website, which is linked to in the parents section of the school website. So thank you very much again for everybody for being with us tonight, and good night.